Hey kids, and welcome back to your digital SAT classroom. So guys, what we're gonna do in this part of the course, this is actually something special that I added for you guys. Initially, I designed this course just to kind of isolate, just to have like each chapter focused on one concept, right? So we went through 9 chapters. Each of those chapters focused on one specific concept or question type tested on the SAT, right? But we thought that it would be even better, right? To even give you guys more value for this course, we thought it'd be a great idea to actually add some practice tests, right? And that's really what this part of the course is going to be about. So really though, what you guys are going to do is you're going to go from what's called deliberate practice, which means just focusing on one specific concept or question type, to now just applying everything that you learned from each of those chapters, right, into like an actual test mode, right? So now you're just going to be practicing taking the digital SAT test as if you were taking the actual thing. Now, just remember, you guys, right? Like, we're not focused on any of the reading comprehension questions. We're just focused on the writing portion, right? Like the grammar style questions, okay? So understand that this isn't going to be exactly like you would take it on the actual test, but it will be for just the writing portion, right, of the exam, okay? And so that's really what we're going to focus on here, you guys, yeah? So some of the things, some high-level points that I want you guys to make sure that you guys fully grasp and apply, right, on this test is, first and foremost, you guys, remember, awareness is key, right? So first of all, you have to recognize what concepts you're being tested on. Yeah, so remember, before you just start automatically reading the passage, take a glance at the answer choices, right? The answer choices can be a powerful tool to tell you what concept or question type the SAT is testing you on. Okay? Now, secondly, you guys, remember, for most of these questions, it is going to be a grammar question, right? So when you recognize the grammar concept that's being tested, then you want to make sure to read grammatically, right? Like, you're not just reading for comprehension now. Remember, you're reading for sentence structure. You're reading for proper grammar, right? Because remember, the SAT is going to 일부러 or purposefully create sentences that are not grammatically correct, right? So your job is to fix it, right? So you want to make sure to read with that sort of grammatical eye, as opposed to reading with just like a reading for just comprehension's sake, okay? Also, you guys, remember to read to the end of the sentences while just making observations. That's it. Right, so you're not trying to solve the question as you read, right? But you're just reading grammatically and you're just reading to the end of that sentence, right? Now, observations that you're making could include maybe like punctuation marks, right? Maybe you notice or observe, oh, this punctuation mark isn't used correctly. Well, that's fine, right, to note or observe that. But this point is saying don't fix it, right? Don't fix it just yet. Just keep reading to the end of the sentence, right? And then after you read to the end of the sentence, right, then you go ahead and solve it though, okay? Remember, when you're doing this, to also plug in answer choice A as you're reading, right? You don't just want to read the blank, like you want to actually put in something into that blanked portion, right? And also remember, you guys, the SAT is notorious, right, for testing you on more than one concept for one particular question. So the way that you want to combat against that is you want to focus on one concept at a time. Okay, don't try to be superheroes and think that you're super awesome multitaskers, right? Thinking that you can do more than one thing simultaneously. Don't do that, right? Instead, you guys, right, focus on just one concept at a time. Eliminate wrong answers, right, based on that one particular concept, and also because, right, the answers that you're eliminating violate grammar rules, right? They violate the rules of grammar, okay? And so this is basically going to be the high-level things that you want to know, right, when you get into, right, test-taking mode. Okay, so with that being said, you guys, let's jump into this test, right? Question number 1. Look at the answer choices. I'm thinking pronouns, pronouns, pronouns. So here it says, amidst a period of great turmoil in the US, Abraham Lincoln, a remarkable leader who has leadership skills worldwide respected, valiantly grappled with the range of daunting obstacles, including the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, which tragically culminated in his untimely death at the hands of John Wilkes Booth. Okay, so first of all, I recognize this who apostrophe S, and if you noticed how I read it, you guys, right? I read it as who is or who has, right? I read it with the sort of uncontracted or the purod version, right? The one that has the verb in it. And the reason I do that though is because it makes it easier for me to hear, right, whether it sounds correct or whether it sounds ridiculously off. Now, when I say a remarkable leader who is leadership skills or who has leadership skills were widely respected, I know this just sounds absurd, right? So I'm gonna cross out answer choice A because I can't have the contraction form. Now next, you guys, I'm also gonna get rid of the that. Now why? Because the that leadership skills were widely respected, that type of dependent clause is supposed to modify or describe things or objects. But I know this dependent clause is modifying or referring to a person. A remarkable leader is a person and not a thing, right? So I know I'm going to cross out D here, right? Because I want to choose a pronoun, a relative pronoun that actually modifies a human, not an object, right? So I'm going to get rid of D. Nextly, you guys, well, it should be pretty like the whom here, right, just makes no sense, right? So when you say a remarkable leader whom leadership skills were widely respected, right, that makes no sense whatsoever, right? When you say leadership skills were widely respected, a leader, right, or him, it makes no sense, right? Because remember, the trick that I taught you guys to make sure or to check whether whom is used correctly is replace this with like him or them, right? The object pronouns. In this case, him probably makes more sense because you're talking about one person, right? Like Lincoln. So here you should be able to make a grammatical sentence with this relative clause if this is used correctly. But when you say leader, you can't do it. There's no possible way you can do it, right? You can't say leadership skills were widely respected him, or him leadership skills were widely respected. Makes no grammatical sense, right? So I'm going to get rid of answer choice C here because it just is not grammatically correct, right? So now here, you guys, answer choice B is going to be the correct answer. Now why? Well, B, W-H-O-S-E is what is known as the possessive form. It's the possessive form for all relative pronouns. So these relative pronouns are pronouns that create relative clauses, the ones that we just kind of took a look at, right? The ones that modify the noun that come before it. Now these relative clauses, you guys, can start with relative pronouns like who, or whom, or that, or which, right? Or whose. Whose is going to be the only relative pronoun that takes on the possessive form. Possession, right? Possession is all, okay? So when we use this correctly, we should have a noun that appears together with the whose, right, that possessive relative pronoun. So you notice that here, right? Whose leadership skills. Whose leadership skills is that noun that this possessive pronoun actually possesses or belongs to. Okay? Now here, when we're talking about whose leadership skills are we talking about? We're talking about this leader's, right? In other words, Lincoln's, right? Lincoln's or his leadership skills. Okay? So this is going to be why, you guys, B would be the correct answer for question number 1. Moving on, you guys, number 2. Take a look at the answer choices. I recognize modifiers. Now, why do I recognize modifiers? Because I have different nouns that appear at the beginning of the answer choices, right? Voice, groups, theory, and Crenshaw. Yeah, and so I recognize, I'm thinking modifier is the grammar concept that the SAT is testing me on. So now that's kind of what I'm looking for, right? Watching out for modifying phrases, yeah? So here we say, credited with originating the theory of intersectionality, which seeks to analyze how multiple identities such as race, gender, and class intersect and contribute to oppression. Kimberly Crenshaw's voice is for marginalized groups that are frequently disregarded and in mainstream discussions, including people of color, women, and members of this community. Okay, so guys, I recognize this modifying phrase at the beginning of the sentence, right? I ask myself, who is credited? Who is credited with originating this theory? Think about it, it has to be a person, right? A person is going to be the one that's given credit to originating a theory, right? So here I know immediately it can't be the person's voice. How can a voice be credited with originating a theory. It makes no logical sense, right? Same thing with these groups. It's not the groups that are credited with the theory, it's actually Crenshaw, right? So this is gonna be why D is gonna be the correct answer, right? Remember you guys, for modifier questions, right, watch out for these answer choices that begin with these possessive nouns, right? These apostrophed nouns. That doesn't count as the noun that appears at the beginning of the answer choice, right? The noun that appears at the beginning of the answer choice is gonna be the noun that appears at the end of that possessive form, right? So Kimberly Crenshaw's theory. So theory is the noun. Can a theory be credited with originating the theory? Makes no logical sense, right? So let's get rid of answer choice C as well, okay? So I like D. I like D as in dog. Moving on, you guys. If I look at the answer choices, I notice, what I notice, this is what my eyes notice, is I notice like sentence structure maybe, right? Kind of like see it. Yeah, especially because of the period. So that's one of the things I'm checking for, right? Is that's basically how I'm going to read, is really reading keeping sentence structure in mind, right? But I can also maybe tell that it's gonna have to do with like punctuation, right? Like if I have no comma, right? Or like a period. So anyways, when I see the period answer choice, that's how I'm kind of reading, is I read with sentence structure in mind, okay? And the punctuation things, sure, I can figure that out later, right? But my main focus is reading with sentence structure in mind. All right, so here, nestled amidst the picturesque mountains of Peru, the ancient archaeological site of Machu Picchu, that's the subject of my sentence, a majestic Incan citadel that dates back to the 15th century, that's non-essential. Continues is my verb. This continues to capture the imagination of visitors from around the world with its intricate stone structures. I have a list, terraced fields and stunning vistas of the surrounding Andean landscape. Machu Picchu offers. I notice a new subject and a verb. So I notice a new sentence being created. So I automatically know, you guys, right, that this, and this are going to be wrong and C is going to be the correct answer. Now, why is that? Well, because I know now for sure, like when I say Machu Picchu offers this, I know that's going to be an independent clause. But I know that this is going to be the second of two independent clauses that appear in this sentence, right? Well, the first one was here. Right, this guy continues to capture the imagination of visitors from around the world. Right, now the only thing that I recognize that separates this sentence from this sentence is just commas, right, or no punctuation, right? So I know that these are all gonna create run-on sentences. Like A, B, and D all create run-on sentences. D creates a run-on sentence, and that's a little bit more subtle, right, is because you have to have the comma and the fanboys and. You can't just have and, right? You have to have the comma plus the fanboys and, okay, to separate two complete sentences, right? So here, I know that answer choice C is going to be the only one that creates a grammatical sentence. Now, here's the thing, guys. This is why I say, like, you want to make sure to read to the end of the sentence and just make observations. Because if you got this question wrong, like, you're either probably choosing A or B, and that's probably because you're stopping somewhere midway in the sentence. Like, you probably stop somewhere here, right? And you can't do that, right? Like, you have to keep reading to the end, especially this part here. Right, because this part, when I have this new subject and verb, I observe that I have a new independent clause that appears, right? So that's the power, right, of reading to the end of that sentence while just making observations, okay? The SAT is really good at hiding context clues, at hiding important information, right, that comes afterwards, sometimes much later than the underlined portion, right, to try to trick you. Okay, so if you miss this, you're not going to get the correct answer, right? But if you can recognize or pay attention to this, right, you will easily see that C is going to be the correct answer. Okay, so this is like one of the styles that SAT uses to create difficult or tricky sentence structure questions, especially because this phrase, like with its intricate stone structures, this can kind of seem like it can blend into the sentence, right? It kind of blends in or ends that first sentence, but sometimes it could also be used to create the beginning of the new sentence, right? And so that's one of the ways that the SAT tries to trick you for complex sentence structures, okay? Don't get fooled by the SAT. Number 4, you guys, take a look at my answer choices. I'm recognizing, okay, I'm thinking punctuation rules, sentence structure, same, right? Especially when I see the colon here, right? I'm thinking, okay, I got sentence structure and punctuation, okay? So that's again how I'm reading. So this guy, the delta is a natural wonder that never fails to amaze visitors. This vast wetland system is home to an incredible range of wildlife. Elephants, lions, hippos, and countless species of birds. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so guys, this is, I would recognize this to be kind of a tricky question, right? Now, depending on how closely you're reading, this could be not tricky at all, or this could be extremely tricky, right? Now, I would think that, okay, so guys, first of all, you have to get rid of, and I think D is gonna be the most obviously wrong answer. This is going to be the one that's obviously wrong, or the most obvious wrong answer. Now, the reason why is if I see a colon here, I have to have an independent clause that comes before it, right? But here, you know, I can't end a sentence with including, right? There's no sentence that ends with including, right? Because it's going to including what, right? Like including is a word that introduces a list or examples. So there has to be things that come after it, right? So I know that I'm going to cross out D here because of that. Also, if you were paying attention, if you took my foundations course and paid attention in that course, keyword is paid attention in that course, is one of the things you want to be aware of for colons is not only do you have to have an independent clause before it, but you cannot have words that introduce lists. The most common words that introduce a list are words like including or such as. Right, in these kind of cases, don't use a colon or a single dash. Instead, just use a comma or no punctuation, okay? And that's really the problem with answer choice B. Okay, so I think if you were paying attention to the foundations class, then B should have been also like an easy answer choice to avoid. Now, the tricky one, if you're not paying attention or reading closely, is gonna be A. So guys, notice how it says a range of wildlife. Notice that term is more general. Right? Notice how it goes from general and then it goes to more specific examples of what those wildlife consist of, right? So we have elephants, lions, hippos, and species of birds, right? So these are the specific examples of the range of wildlife. You see that, right? So you notice how this first term is the wildlife, that general term, and then the rest of these items are specific examples of that general term. Right? In these kind of cases, you guys, you cannot separate that, you cannot connect the general term to the specific items with just a comma, with only a comma. You cannot. That's, you know, because notice how it makes it kind of confusing, right? It makes it seem like the wildlife, the range of wildlife is one of the examples in this list, but it's not, right? The examples in the list begins with elephants. Right, but notice how putting the comma here kind of makes that kind of confusing, right? Kind of makes you think like it's part of the list, right? When really it's not. And so this is why you want to get rid of A. So the way to grammatically write this out would be to use that word including, right? Because now including, what this does, it kind of gives you or introduces specific examples of that general thing that you mentioned right before, right? So this is going to be why C here is going to be the correct answer for this question, okay? Next, you guys, number 5. If I look at my answer choices, okay, I notice the semicolon there, I'm thinking sentence structure, right? Sentence structure and punctuation. Sentence structure and punctuation, which tends to go hand in hand, okay? So here, that's how I'm kind of reading. It says, a solution that mimics the presence of a predator. Sorry, guys, this word shouldn't be in here, okay? So, and it's not in your workbook, so don't worry about it. So here when you say a solution that mimics the presence of a predator, the fox lights, is a flashing lights and sound system developed to deter predators like coyotes, foxes, and wolves. Okay, so ignore this term predator because it's part of your answer choices, okay? So this is just a typo in the question, only on this slide. In your workbook, though, you won't have that error, okay? Because I fixed it. I will fix it. So, anyways, you guys, first and foremost, okay, this one's a little bit tricky, right? Because of the way that the sentence is structured, okay? But now this is where I think if you just kind of like trust yourself, like trust the rules of grammar that I taught you, okay? You can kind of cross out answer choices one answer choice at a time. So what I mean by that is, boom, I'm gonna cross out B. Now why? Because if I plug in B into my original sentence or the passage, this just creates a sentence with a single dash, right? It's a single dash here. Now remember you guys, right, the sort of grammar rule for a single dash is you have to have an independent clause that comes before the single dash, right? And notice how we don't here, right? A solution that mimics the presence of a predator, this is just a long subject, right? This is like a noun, a solution that's combined with a dependent clause, right? To make a longer subject. This is like me kind of saying, the book that was given by my grandmother. A solution, which solution? Oh, it's the solution that mimics the presence of a predator, right? That's not a complete sentence, right? It's just one long subject, right? This information is missing a verb, a main verb to make it a complete sentence, right? So if you say a solution that mimics the presence of a predator is awesome, right, then that would be a complete sentence because is would be your verb. But here, as it's written, there is no verb, okay? So this is gonna be why I know I don't have an IC before the dash, so I can get rid of B. For that same exact reason, I can also get rid of C, right? Because a semicolon's job is gonna be to separate ICs, but I don't have that IC before the semicolon, right? So this is why I can get rid of C as well, okay? So now you guys, here, notice how D, it sounds really funny here, right? Like if you read this, you wouldn't read it like it's grouped together. You would have to separate the information, right? You wouldn't say, a solution that mimics the presence of a predator the fox lights. Of a predator the fox lights. Of a predator the fox lights is an example of words that do not belong together, right? Because what sense does it make? Of a predator the fox lights. Of a predator the fox lights doesn't make any grammatical sense, right? So here you would have to use some kind of punctuation, right, to separate, right, those terms. Right, so this is why D is also going to be wrong. So this would make answer choice A the correct answer, right? But let's go one step further, you guys, yeah? Why would A be correct? So notice how we have double dashes, okay? So remember, I told you guys, when you have double dashes in your sentence, do two things. First of all, read around the double dashes, right? If you read around the double dashes, it should still make grammatical sense, okay? It should still be grammatically correct and make logical sense, right? So here if we say, a solution that mimics the presence of a predator is a flashing lights and sound system developed to deter predators like these guys. Grammatically correct and makes logical sense, right? It does, yeah? We have our subject, verb, and our complete thought. Right, grammatically correct, plus it makes sense. Now, second thing is check, right? The information in between the two dashes, this is just non-essential information, right? Non-essential information. And its job is going to be to clarify, right, something about the previous information, right? So really, the fox light is giving you the name of this solution, right? So basically, you think about it, the fox lights is the name for the solution that imitates the presence of a predator. Simply put, right? And so we know that that also is logically correct, right? Thereby making answer choice A the correct answer. Okay? So if you guys know your punctuation rules extremely well, notice how I can confidently, without question, get to the correct answer for this question. Okay? And that's really the idea, right? Is you gotta know your punctuation, your grammar rules extremely well. You gotta master the foundations, right? If you wanna master this test, okay? Guys, that'll be it for the first portion of this test. I'll see you guys in that next lesson when we cover question number 6 through 10, I believe. Okay? Take care, you guys. I'll see you guys soon.